Good evening. Thank you, Bill, very much for inviting me back, and thank you all for joining us for the conversation today that I very much want to be a conversation. And I am indeed flattered that you're willing to spend an hour of your intellectual entertainment with us tonight. Entertainment, however, as Bill prefaced, that is in fact on a very grim topic. A fundamental topic for the United States, the opioid epidemic in the US. It's a very devastating health crisis. It is the single worst drug epidemic that this country has ever experienced. That is no small thing to say. The United States has had for decades a voracious demand for narcotic drugs, for drugs that cause recreational highs, that has structured and driven supply of illegal drugs and the threats and harms that such a supply poses around the world for decades. And so to say now that the opioid epidemic is really the worst one that we have ever experienced is a very significant statement. It is also a drug epidemic that had very different origins than the previous ones. And in some ways, like the previous ones, it has very significant international and global repercussions, but the vectors and effects are, again, quite different than what we have seen in prior drug epidemics, such as the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s and 1990s, and the methamphetamine crisis in the 1990s and 2000s. And other drug epidemics. The US story is rather well known at this point, but nonetheless I would like to start with it to some extent because it's crucial for understanding what has happened and what's unwinding, and also because we are at a rather dramatic moment in the US element of that story. And then so two events that those of you who are interested in the topics have perhaps noted over the past week. One was, or 2 weeks. One was that Purdue Pharma, a large pharmaceutical company and the one that's most notoriously associated with the epidemic, settled a lawsuit in Oklahoma for $270 million. Now, the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma that sued Purdue Pharma for its responsibility in the opioid epidemic asked for $1 billion. They settled for $270 million. That may sound like a lot of money, but in fact, in comparison with the scope of the profits of pharmaceutical companies like Purdue, it's actually not that large amount. So that just happened recently, and the other big thing that happened on Monday was that top-level Chinese authorities announced that they were making as controlled substance scheduling all fentanyl class-based drugs. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid like Oxycontin and others that I'll talk about. And this was in some ways a culmination or a first step in what has preoccupied US and Chinese diplomacy, or US diplomacy toward China, I should say, since really the Obama era. Neither of these events will end the opioid epidemic. Neither might be an inflection point, but both are significant moments of the story. With that little bit of a teaser for you, let me now back up and give you some of the facts. How many of you know how many people died in the United States of drug overdose last year? Or how many of you are willing to venture some number, please?
Isn't it around 65,000?
Any other guess?
500,000.
No, thank God, not that yet. So the number last year was 72,000, of which the very substantial portion, at least half, was related specifically to opioids. What are opioids? Opioids are drugs that are it's a class of drugs that is one of the narcotics drugs. It's also drugs that are used for pain relief and during surgeries. So they have very significant and crucial medical effects. Unlike potentially some other illegal drugs that medical communities and narcotics officials deem not to have any medical benefit. But opioids, whether derived from plants like poppy that produces morphine or thebaine or other alkaloids from which drugs, pain relief drugs like morphine are derived, as well as recreational drugs such as heroin are derived. Opioids, synthetic and plant-based, have very significant medical effects. They're used in anesthesia. If you're going to go have a surgery, I hope you don't, but if you will have a surgery, it's really much better to have a surgery with anesthesia and with pain relief than without. Nonetheless, opioids are enormously addictive. And in addition to having these medical benefits, they also cause euphoria, recreational high. And the fact that the body becomes rather very quickly dependent on them, and in addition to becoming dependent on them physiologically, it generates positive psychological states for a while, makes those drugs extremely susceptible for abuse. Now, how did we get to this 72,000 people dying from opioid overdose last year? Well, the year prior, so this is number from 2017, and I haven't seen the 2018 numbers. There is hope that that number has perhaps leveled off, but essentially for a decade we have been on a steady rise of overdose deaths. That number has gone from 30,000 a year to 50,000 in 2016 to 72,000 last year. And by some predictions, if basic trends do not change, and of course there is a lot of focus on policy interventions, in the next decade we might get in fact to 500,000 Americans dying of them. Now those are enormous numbers. More Americans over since 2000 at this point have died as a result of the opioid epidemic than the number of Americans who died in World War I and World War II combined. The total number of Americans who died during the Vietnam War was about 60,000, in the 60,000. Last year, 72,000 Americans died as a result of drug overdose. And of course, that 72,000 number does not truly capture the scale of the health effects that the crisis is having. Many more people overdose and survive. Yet a crucial element of overdose is that the brain and other organs are deprived of oxygen. So even people who survive an overdose may be severely medically hampered for the rest of their lives. They might never be able to recover. The level of their health might be severely limited and jeopardized. And even people who are addicted have a very profound medical illness that has a range of effects on their physical health, on their social and economic well-being, on their capacity to hold and maintain jobs. A whole spiral of negative effects can very easily take place in the context of addiction. So in 2015, where we were still at around 40,000 dead, the economic cost of the epidemic was estimated at about $500 billion, 2.8% of the GDP. That was in 2015, where we were at less than half of the number of deaths that we have experienced in 2017. So again, multiple scale of effects. So what is different about this epidemic than the others? Well, the intensity of the death rates, overdose, and its effect is one difference. But the very important difference is how the epidemic originated. And it originated with legal opioids. It originated with pharmaceutical companies like Purdue, starting in the 1990s, engaging in a very significant marketing campaign that at its heart claimed that the new opioids that they synthesize, like Oxycontin, were not addictive. And the companies were very aggressively pushing this claim by sending sales representatives to doctors to persuade doctors that they had now this marvelous new drug, a very crucial drug of pain relief, who would not be addictive. They spent enormous marketing campaign focused on the entire scope of the regulatory body that should be protecting the US public. I'll speak a little bit later about the international dimensions where a lot of my work focuses, and I want to mention at this point that lots of this work, and particularly the US pharma regulatory failure story, is the product of joint work with two colleagues, Professor John Calkins at Carnegie Mellon University and Professor Keith Humphreys at Stanford, who have been my collaborators on a variety of drug policy projects, and this work also reflects our collaboration. Now, why is it that we go to this stage that the entire regulatory system on the US side essentially collapsed? Well, one dimension of that is that pain is a very significant medical condition. And in the United States, for decades, pain was very significantly undertreated, was very significantly under-recognized. Palliative care was often inadequate. And this is not true just about the United States, it's also true about other parts of the world. I grew up in communist Czechoslovakia, and in the 80s my father was dying of cancer without palliative care. And it was an excruciating, hideous, awful death that should have never taken place the way that it did without palliative care. So I want to absolutely emphasize that, as I will be, and I'm very critical of the pharmaceutical companies, that should not be taken to mean that pain should not be medicated. We should not go back to the 80s and before, where excruciating pain was not medicated. The big problem arose when pharmaceutical companies like Purdue started claiming that the opioids that are enormously addictive will not be addictive, and so it's okay to use them not merely for very significant pain, such as terminal pain in patients, in cancer patients or other terminal cases, but it's okay to use it essentially like Advil. That it's okay to use it for chronic pain because people won't get addicted, and that it's okay to use for relatively minor pain conditions, such as a sprained ankle. And instead, what we know today, that opioids like Oxycontin can get people addicted within a matter of days. And so the big difference in this epidemic was that it started through legal means. And in fact, it unleashed an epidemic that the illegal drug market could never and has never succeeded in unleashing. Big Pharma managed to co-opt and really subvert the entire regulatory chain. They spent enormous amount of money lobbying everyone from doctors themselves, particularly doctors who started writing enormous amount of opioid like Oxycontin prescriptions, medical schools, medical oversight bodies, the Food and Drug Administration, all kinds of other independent oversight and regulatory bodies, or who should have been independent and regulatory bodies, ended up under sway. So we ended up in a situation where in places like West Virginia, where you had a community of about 400 people, well over 1 million pills of Oxycontin would be issued for 400 people. Clearly, some massive diversion was going on. When the Drug Enforcement Administration started investigating this case, but clearly it was obvious that massive diversion into the illegal trade, into recreational drugs is taking place. pharmaceutical companies and drug distributors responded by hiring away drug enforcement agents to work for them and to shut down the investigation. And later on, they lobbied members of US Congress to pass laws that prohibited the DEA or significantly hampered the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, in investigating cases such as this, where obviously diversion was taking place. So from the design of the laws to existing regulatory bodies, there were systematic and significant failures and constant deceptions. And truly constant malfeasance. So many of you have perhaps followed the outcry today, where you have museums disavowing donations from the Sackler family, the family who owns Purdue Pharma, to many other lawsuits going on. There's a mega lawsuit in the state of Ohio where 1,600 plaintiffs are suing companies like Purdue, others. It's not just Purdue alone. It's the federal case. Multiple cases are happening at state level. The New York state attorney last week unsealed a major case against those pharmaceutical companies. But the settlements that have taken place, like the one in Oklahoma, and prior fines with which Purdue were charged, have remained on the order of $600 million, $270 million in this scope, where the profits for Purdue are on the order of tens of billions. So for a company that makes $43 billion, to pay $660 million is nothing. It's just cost of business. So the regulatory effect, even of those fines, has been limited so far. But here I want to move to the international dimensions of the story. As the epidemic was unwinding and deaths were mounting on the streets and first responders had to respond to them more and more, the realization kicked in that the narrative that Oxycontin and other synthetic opioids are not addictive was false. And we have seen a progressive movement to reduce the number of prescriptions the doctors write. Doctors themselves responded, educational campaigns were mounted, policies such as informing doctors that people for whom they wrote prescription overdosed had significant effect on reducing the number of prescriptions. So the amount of supply that was coming from the legal channels went radically down. Yet at this point, there was a vast number of Americans that were addicted and who no longer had the easy supply to going to multiple doctors and coming out with bags of Oxycontin in their hands. So what happened? Well, of course, they turned to the illegal market. And at first, the illegal market was not able to supply synthetic opioids. Instead, the drug, the use of which shot up, was heroin. And this was the first time in the US really since the late 70s. US heroin market was always very limited. The illegal drugs of choice, in addition to cannabis, were cocaine and methamphetamines. Europe, for decades, focused on shooting up on heroin and was not interested in snorting coke until the late 1990s. In the US, the market was reversed. But the curtailing of the legal opioid supply all of a sudden pushes heroin, demand for heroin in the US up. And one consequence, of course, is that poppy cultivation in Mexico goes radically up. And Mexican drug trafficking groups move into this space now to be supplying heroin. And this generates a tremendous amount of consequences for Mexico itself. The poppy farmers are often enormously poor indigenous communities who oftentimes hover on barely making any kind of living. Their income often is on the order of $1 a day, true definition of extreme poverty, often without access to health care, without access to schooling, very poor, very marginalized populations living in areas and parts of Mexico that have suffered from historic marginalization, underdevelopment, opacity of state institutions. And now they are making money because the cartels are sponsoring poppy cultivation, but at the same time they're also suffering from multiple forms of violence. The drug cartels are very violent and they frequently fight over territories, including poppy cultivation territories. And so the areas that became prime areas for cultivation, like what is called the Tierra Caliente of Guerrero and Michoacán, also became enormously violent areas. And at the same time, the second form of violence is, of course, the eradication policy of the Mexican government with pressure from the United States to destroy those poppy fields. But nonetheless, for a while, these communities were making a significant amount of money. Now, that changed as well, and we have moved into a sort of second phase of the international dynamic. Heroin was still much less potent than synthetic opioids, and it's also hitting an overdose. Fentanyl has been used in surgeries, and it's also used in the case of terminal cancer patients who have stopped responding to other opioids. Just as addicts develop dependence, so do people who have severe pain. They develop dependence on opioids, and they need an ever larger dose to combat the pain. That same thing happens with medical patients. And so fentanyl was one of the drugs that was supposed to be used in addition to surgeries when other opioids would stop working. And fentanyl made its way, was synthesized back in the 50s and made its way onto the illegal market in the 80s. But it very quickly went out of the market because users were dying. And so users became scared of it and rejected using it because it was so unpredictable and the chance of overdose was so high. Now that changed now, however. And so the US market has started to be flooded and actively supplied by fentanyl, fentanyl that's diverted into illegal channels, principally from China. Synthetic drugs are very easy to alter slightly to preserve their recreational and other effects, while the formula of the drug changes somewhat. So it's not just that there is this drug called fentanyl, there are many what's called analogs, many versions of the drug. Another version is called carfentanil that is even many more times as potent as fentanyl. And we are really talking about potency that allows one envelope of the product to cause up to 1 million overdoses. Think of that. Now that has very significant implications if you are a drug trafficker. If you are a drug trafficker, the amount of heroin that you need to supply, that you need to provide to supply a market in terms of volume and bulk is many times as great as what it takes to supply that same market with fentanyl. And so all of a sudden, with the diversion of fentanyl for the illegal market, what became possible was to ship drugs by mail. And that radically changed drug smuggling channels, and that has radical implications for many dimensions of global drug policy and illegal drug markets. So since fentanyl started making its way into the US, there are now many, many analogs of fentanyl. The United States and China have been in this sort of quid pro quo constant game of the US demanding that China schedules that it makes controlled the production of various analogs of fentanyl. And it was constant cat and mouse game because China, under pressure, would schedule one variety of fentanyl, and very soon chemists would slightly alter the formula that was no longer illegal, that was no longer a controlled substance. So finally, on Monday, China announced that it will make all fentanyl-class, fentanyl-like drugs controlled. They can still be produced, they're still needed in the legal market, but they can only be produced with special licenses, and they can only be exported with special licenses. China has become a very significant player and vector then in the US illegal drug market, and in a crucial player in the opioid epidemic. The fentanyl deaths are now really driving the majority of the overdoses. And fentanyl is no longer cut just into heroin, it's being actively added into cocaine and methamphetamines as well. All of which has, again, boosted the chance for overdose for all these class of drugs, and makes it very hard for users to know how to use without causing themselves overdose. Because when a user buys drugs from a dealer on the street, they often really do not know what the mixture contains. How much of it, they might be told this is heroin, but they don't know how much of it is fentanyl. If it's a mixture of fentanyl and cocaine, what are the exact proportions? Now, the fact that China made this legal change does not necessarily mean that we will see a significant reduction of the flow of fentanyl from China. Beyond the regulatory dimension, China needs to start enforcing that market as well. And that's a very substantial problem. China has at least 5,000 pharmaceutical companies. Like in the United States, they are very, very powerful. They generate great deal of jobs and great deal of income, which Chinese officials very much care about. China's key preoccupation is to be employing its population and reducing the number of people in poverty, including to maintain the political system that it has. So cracking down on big pharma comes with very significant political and economic costs. Beyond these 5,000 pharmaceutical companies, there are very many, perhaps in the tens of thousands of other chemical companies in China, all of which are also capable of producing drugs like fentanyl. Fentanyl and synthetic opioids are not the only class of synthetic drugs that can be abused. And beyond that, you have at least 160,200 facilities where those drugs are being manufactured. Those are legal facilities. Now, within those legal facilities, it's very easy to divert some of the product into the illegal supply in the United States, especially as we're talking about very small amounts. For those 200,000, 160,000, 200,000 facilities, China's up to now had about 2,000 inspectors. You can guys do the math and figure out what are the odds about there being meaningful oversight of those facilities. And so we are yet to see whether this legal move will then be translated into not just having the legal framework for enforcement, but crucially being able to deliver enforcement. But meanwhile, the rise of fentanyl has had effects in Mexico. All those very poor poppy farmers who from about 2015 through 2017 were investing and making income from poppy have seen their income crash. So in 2016, a kilo of heroin was, a kilo of opium rather I should say, was bringing about $1,000, $1,200, maybe $1,600 in Guerrero, in Michoacan. So a family that was very lucky could perhaps earn even $10,000 a year. Poppy farmers' income that was much greater than anything they had experienced. But now the price is down to about $250, $300 per kilo. Why? Because the interest in heroin has gone significantly down, with fentanyl being the real game in town. Nonetheless, even if China now starts having perfect enforcement and there is no more illegal diversion of fentanyl from China to the United States, will that dry up the illegal source of fentanyl in the US? And the answer is no. Other countries are already producing similar drugs and have very large pharmaceutical companies. Immediately, India comes to mind. Already some synthetic drugs like fentanyl are coming to the United States. Many more can come. The pharmaceutical industry in India is very powerful as ours, much less regulated than the pharmaceutical companies in the United States, with all the regulatory failures, and with all the same incentives of generating jobs and income in India, in the country of a context of poverty. On top of that, the response of Big Pharma here is really analogous to how Big Tobacco responded to the regulatory changes and penalties and lawsuits it faced in the United States. This active effort to move abroad. So Purdue Pharma set up its international branch called Mundipharma, and they are now active from Brazil to India to Hungary, Poland, Mexico, a whole set of countries where they are essentially trying to create a new analogous market. Exactly the same thing that happened with Big Tobacco. When Big Tobacco came to be regulated and penalized in the US, it actively hunted for a new market with new potential for vast addiction in places like China, Indonesia, India, and others. And the US pharma companies are behaving exactly in the same way. Particularly, there is aggressive effort to create joint ventures with the Indians and to start supplying opioids throughout Asia and into Africa. What is particularly distressing and really quite an evil part of the story is that the practices that they are employing abroad are analogous to the practices, or in fact identical to the same practices that they deployed here. They are looking for doctors to start overprescribing drugs. They are lobbying the countries to change their laws on who can write medication. For example, in Poland, Mundipharma succeeded in a lobbying effort so that any medical provider, even a nurse, can write prescriptions for opioids, again to really create new addiction that they can feed. They're maintaining the same claims that these drugs are not dangerous, that they are not addictive, that because of the time release element in them, they will not cause addiction. We know that this is incorrect. We know these are false claims. At this point, they are not just claims that will inadvertently be incorrect. They are actually fallacious. Yet in many of these countries, the story is not known. And in many of these countries, there is a vast need to medicate pain, which is a crucial aspect and should be a crucial aspect of the provision of healthcare. So I want to allow at least some time for questions, but I just want to mention some of the recommendations that John Hawkins, Kip Humphreys, and I came up, not with how you deal with the addiction on the street. We can talk about that. We can talk about harm reduction, methadone maintenance, buprenorphine, all of which are fundamental. But how do you deal with the tough element? How do you deal with the better regulatory story of big pharmaceutical companies and the need to medicate the world of pain, what we call a world of pain, yet medicate it in a way that does not unleash the same catastrophic consequences abroad that have happened here? And so the first recommendation is that governments must really think very carefully about how to structure incentives for pharmaceutical companies not to profit from oversupplying and over-promoting opioids. And that is not easy. The latest twist on the Purdue story is not only that they knowingly promote the addiction to drug epidemic, one of their responses was, aha, now we can move into the game of providing treatment medication such as buprenorphine. So the whole intention was to profit both from the addiction as well as then from drugs that treat the addiction. So how do you move away, at least abroad and ideally in the United States as well, from changing this game, from the companies not profiting on over-prescription and over-pushing, over-promoting opioids? And so one of the very simple but radical recommendations we have is to ban for-profit companies from being allowed to sell prescription drugs for extended use at home. And in many parts of the world, like Africa, like Asia, where pain is under-medicated, deliver pain medication such as morphine via governments or via NGOs, but not allow marketing and not allow market to deliver those medications in the way it took place in the United States. That has many dimensions to it. It's not necessarily easy. You could imagine all kinds of collusion and perversion of the regulatory system between the NGOs and the governments and the big pharma, but at least it's a first step to start considering. Treating people who are already ill, who are addicted, and many of whom will be chronically ill for the rest of their life is fundamental, but it's not sufficient. Even in the United States, even today at the height of the opioid epidemic, we still vastly underprovide methadone. We still vastly underprovide buprenorphine, both medication for treatment, as well as drugs like naloxone that can reverse an overdose. But that's not enough. Getting away from the addiction in the first place by regulating big pharma is crucial. And that means that regulators need to move beyond thinking. Regulators like the Food and Drug Administration in the US need to stop thinking about regulation simply in the matter of if those drugs are taken as prescribed, they will be fine. The point is that there is a very high potential that the drugs will not be taken as prescribed. And so the standard approaches to the way that a heart medication is regulated is not adequate in these cases. And finally, we should perhaps also talk, and that's a point I want to end before we can start having conversation, about different forms of penalties. So I mentioned this spate of lawsuits, and I mentioned the settlement in Oklahoma. That's still only $270 million for a company that makes tens of billions. And so perhaps we could start thinking of penalties in a way that penalizes for every overdose that's caused by the medication that the company supplied. That's not easy. There are very many problems. The company can say, well, perhaps the person had the first exposure due to oxycodone, but ultimately they overdosed on fentanyl with heroin. So it's not a complex way to devise that. And certainly there are ways to think about it, but having one-off penalties at levels that are in order of magnitude lesser than annual profits is simply not adequate, has not been adequate to change the behavior of big pharma in the US and the consequences and change the behavior in those companies abroad. Now, just to end the Purdue story, Purdue is now threatening bankruptcy as a way to avoid the litigation. But we have also learned that the Sackley family that was unsealed in the New York State Attorney case has moved tens of millions of dollars into other assets, so that when Purdue goes under, the family does not use massive wealth, and other assets have been moved into Mundi Pharma, which policies continue. So let me leave it here and then have a conversation with you about many dimensions of the story, whichever dimensions you would like. Please.
Does the American Medical Association have a clear opinion of this crisis, and where's their stance? How do they articulate their position?
The whole health community in general has been really catching up to the story. There have been, both at state level and federal level, various guidelines and policies issued. For example, at state level, Massachusetts was a pioneer in demanding that all medical personnel needs to have some training in palliative care. You would think that would be a very important aspect of getting a medical license. In fact, has not been. And so many doctors, out of their entire medical schooling, would have maybe 1 hour of schooling on palliative care, which made doctors very susceptible to, of course, manipulations by the pharmaceutical companies. So at the state level, there are guidelines requiring the teaching of palliative care. Both at the federal and state level, there are guidelines as to the amount of prescription, how many days it's safe to prescribe drugs like oxycodone, what are the conditions for which it should be prescribed, what are some of the procedures for which it would be prescribed. Of course, it's very difficult because if you have a heart condition and you are to be issued heart medication, there are physical tests that determine whether you have a heart condition or not. If you have cholesterol, your blood work will show that you have cholesterol. Pain, there is no effective measure for pain, and we know that pain is highly subjective. Different people have different perception of pain and different suffering from what would be the analogous amount of injury. And so this is what makes that aspect of medicine so complicated and so different, and it was also a challenge for American Medical Association and others to be responding to some of these dimensions, because we don't want to go to where pain, especially severe pain, is not treated. But so the policies continues to be evolving. There is a lot of experimentation. There are still shocking gaps. I mentioned the 3 treatment medications like buprenorphine and methadone. It's still amazingly difficult and challenging to access them. If you're a medical doctor, you need many hours of extra training to be allowed to write a license for buprenorphine. Oftentimes you need to be willing to allow law enforcement agencies like DA access to all of your records to write buprenorphine, even though that buprenorphine is really life-saving and saving of the quality of life. Even people who will continue using illegal drugs, who will not be able to break their addiction, will be much more stable and have much better quality of life and much lesser chance of overdose if they are on buprenorphine. But it's vastly overprovided, they cannot get to it. So one of the debates is, should emergency rooms be allowed to use buprenorphine? If someone is an addict, there's primary preoccupation is to stop experiencing withdrawal, or not to experience withdrawal, is to chase the next hit before withdrawal kicks in. And if they fail, they will often end up in emergency with all kinds of very nasty withdrawal symptoms. Yet the vast majority of emergency rooms is only allowed to treat them for symptoms and is not allowed to give them buprenorphine, or buprenorphine is not available, although that might often be a critical trigger for getting people into more systematic treatment. So all of that is still being debated in the context of US drug policies, where these measures called harm reduction measures have been very much against the grain of US drug counter-narcotics policy that has often tried to prevent harm reduction, with the claim that if people have lesser consequences from using, they will be more tempted to use.
I have 3 questions. The first one, do you think that legalizing of marijuana medically and recreationally at a federal level would alleviate the demand for opiates? Second, to touch on your last point about pharmaceutical companies transferring their assets from one entity to another, do you think it's feasible to allow criminal sanctions for such transfers? And then the third one having to do with capture. Do you think it's feasible to create criminal sanctions for the employee who is being captured, so with the one that would be at the regulatory agency and then working for a pharmaceutical company or a lobbyist firm for the same?
Let me start with the 2 latter legal questions. I'm not a lawyer, and you know, I'm stepping on very thin ice and kind of venturing opinion that's not based in really legal understanding here. I would imagine that even if such laws existed, there would be a lot of challenge, or the core of the issue would be knowing knowing deception. Now, what is really shocking about those lawsuits that are going on is that the knowing deception has gone on, that systematically pharmacies, drug distributors, sales representatives were fully aware they were engaging in behavior that was either, at minimum, immoral and problematic and responsible for the opioid epidemic. And it seems to me that there should be legal penalties for that. But I am not a lawyer to determine where the legal scope is, but those cases are unwinding across the United States at federal and sub-federal level precisely for that. So we will see the answer soon in some ways. Now, let me just point out that if in the first 2007 case against Purdue, for which they settled in which they settled for $600,000, the three top executives who were being charged in those cases ended up with about 40 days of community work for death rates in the tens of thousands and many more addicted. Where if you are a dealer on the street and you're caught with small amount of heroin that you are dealing to partially support your habit, you will end up in US prisons for easily 40 years. So the legal system is currently massively disproportionate in whom it targets. 40 days versus 40 years for supplying a small local market versus overseeing, knowing addictions of millions of Americans. So at this point, about 2.8 million of Americans are addicted. Your first question on the marijuana. Well, we don't know the answer. There is a significant move to use marijuana as a painkiller. Legal marijuana has been around for a while, even before full recreational marijuana kicked in. Nonetheless, a lot of the studies, a lot of the verdict is still out. I would imagine that might end up being a venue to consider for certainly chronic pain. I don't think that it is likely to be an adequate substitution for intense terminal or very intense pain, and it shouldn't be. For that we should have much better regulated but consistent legal supply. But the chronic pain is the big difficult area right now. So we know that if someone has cancer, terminal cancer, or even cancer, it's worth and crucial supplying them with legal opioids like oxycodone and morphine and other versions of it. We also know that if someone has a surgery and they go home with probably 3 days of supply of oxycodone, they will be fine. They will not get addicted quickly. It's dealing with chronic pain that's not severe, but that is very limiting and that's prolonged. And here is where there is need for innovation. I'm not a doctor. I am not a I'm not a researcher in pharmacological researcher to be able to give answer, but clearly we shouldn't be stuck in where we are. And so for some of that, medical marijuana might be inadequate, but I think we need many more very careful studies to be able to ascertain what is the real efficacy. And what's happening with many marijuana products today is they claim to have effects on palliative care, like for arthritis, but oftentimes there are just vastly different amounts of the chemicals of the drugs that medicate pain that people are buying. So if you go to marijuana store and you want to buy something for arthritis, whatever it says on the label, there's no guarantee that what is on the label is in fact what you are using. So the under-regulation, the severe under-regulation of the legal marijuana proliferating industry is in some ways analogous to the under-regulation story of the big pharma. The effects are very different, but in this case the effect might be that you are really being tricked into buying something that's not very potent, that's not very effective, or that can have many more recreational effects than it's supposed to have, right? So you have all kinds of products that are not supposed to give any recreational high, and when random testing has taken place, it has found that it has THC, even though it's claiming not to have. So, we also need to much more diligently monitor and regulate the legal marijuana industry than has been the case.
You might not be able to answer this, but how else can we treat pain if we continue to opioids?
I cannot answer that. I think that there is need for much more innovation. There is need for much more medical focus. I can sort of give answers. How do we get to that state? One is enabling research. The other is focusing the medical community into treating pain seriously, but at the same time doing it in ways that will not replicate what has happened. But I would also say that probably a very important element of that is focusing on mental health. That is excruciatingly underprovided in the United States and in the world, where our attitude toward mental health is to perhaps provide it very much in need basis, either to patients who are very mentally ill, or patients who can afford it, who can afford going to psychologists or psychiatrists for depression, mood disorders, adjustment disorders. But it's not systematically built in. There is still tremendous stigma. There are tremendous institutional, financial, other barriers. And we have a concept that for physical health, we have yearly checks-up from childbirth on. There is no such concept for medical health, either on the part of doctors or on the part of patients. And so both public health in general and pain and addiction, I would posit that mainstreaming and streamlining mental health into medical care provision would probably be quite fundamental as well.
Do you think we should continue marketing pharmaceuticals directly to the public?
Well, so I would answer it by saying depends on what pharmaceuticals, and certainly with addictive opioids, the sort of core radical heretical claim that Keith, John, and I made is that no, we shouldn't. That we should get away from the model. And I would imagine there is a whole other set of classes of drugs. Think of antidepressants. And I want to maintain very much the notion that we need to treat mental health very seriously, and lots of mental health requires pharmacological intervention. But I am not sure that this should be going, that the advertising should be going to the public, should be going to patients.
Okay.
Please.
So I know you kind of mentioned about how intervention through, international agencies. Do you think there should be established like an oversight international body that kind of monitors like countries like India, say, that do not necessarily meet the standards that have been established in the United States?
So there are international bodies. The most prominent one is the International Narcotics Control Board. They have been very interested and focused on opioids, that they are trying to establish all kinds of monitoring and engagement with countries like India. But they don't necessarily have any enforcement power. They can advise, they can provide technical assistance, they can encourage, they can pressure. Sometimes they can sanctions by putting countries on a blacklist, by highlighting their misbehavior. But ultimately enforcement still remains very much by a country. Or in some cases, the United States could apply its economic sanctions in terms of enforcement.
I have the terrible job here to bring our formal part of the evening to a close. Let me thank you, Rhonda, for informing us on a very important and needed topic. Thank you all for your great questions. It's always not the best part, but a good part of the program. Let me invite you back in a couple weeks for our next and last lecture of the semester. We'll be turning to quite a different topic. We'll be turning to K through 12 education, and we'll have a colleague out from Brookings, John Vallant, who has studied the causes and consequences of student discipline in the K through 12 system across the country. And another timely topic, but he'll be informing us on what seems to be working, what's not working, where there are problems created by disciplinary actions, as well as hopefully solved by them. So if you can join us, we'd love to see you then. If you have a question or comment, we'll be around for a little while, but thanks for your time.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
Hello, I'm Michael Naft. Outreach and constituent services are among my top priorities as your representative for District A on the Clark County Commission. Several state legislators are joining me in hosting a series of informal meetings with residents to hear your concerns, provide information, and discuss possible solutions. For more information, please visit ClarkCountyNV.gov or call me at 702-455-3500.
Our community, our home, Clark County, Nevada. Thanks for watching Clark County Television, Southern Nevada's best access to local government.
Hello, I'm Randy Swallow. Welcome to In Your Neighborhood. For the next half hour, we'll talk county issues and District F issues with a man who represents the area, your Commissioner, Justin Jones. Good morning, Commissioner.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Excellent. We're here at the Chinatown Plaza on Spring Mountain Road in District F. District F is one of the largest commission districts, stretching from the central part of the valley west to Red Rock and Blue Diamond. Other rural communities in District F include Sandy Valley, Good Springs, and Jean. Here's a quick look in your neighborhood, District F. District F is home to the newest downtown in Clark County, Downtown Summerlin. The county's largest master plan community has developed a couple million square feet for dining, shopping, entertainment, and more in a mixed-use, fully walkable marketplace. Other major game-changing private businesses choosing to slide into District F include the swimmingly successful Wet n Wild Water Park. And expect furniture fans to flock to the iconic blue and yellow behemoth IKEA store near the 215 Beltway in Durango, a Swedish-designed retailer that is the world's largest. And another master-planned neighborhood, Mountain's Edge, continues to rise in District F. Thousands of residents now enjoy recreating at Phase 1 of the newly opened Mountain's Edge Regional Park, with some of the coolest facilities in town. Desert Breeze Regional Park continues to be one of the best, with an indoor-outdoor aquatic center and hundreds of acres of green space and more. And the rural portions of District F include Sandy Valley, Blue Diamond, Good Springs, and Jean, lending a slice of the slower lifestyle compared to the fast-paced urban growth for residents and businesses in District F. Commissioner, this is the Las Vegas Chinatown Plaza. This is basically the epicenter of Chinatown. About 25 years this place has been here and part of District F. Why did you bring us out here today for District F?
Well, I think it's an exciting time of year. We're celebrating the Year of the Pig. It's a Chinese New Year, so I figured what better time to be down in Chinatown Plaza than right now.
And again, everyone seems to know this place with the pagodas and roof tiles and everything like that. And what the county has had a good relationship with Chinatown and with the people here in this area.
Well, I think Spring Mountain right now is just booming. You've seen Lotus down the street as the first true residential high-rise development down here in the Spring Mountain corridor. We've worked very closely with the folks here along the Spring Mountain corridor to continue the development down here. It's just hot. This is a place to be right now.
I'm not sure how much you know about this, Commissioner, but the county entered into the Chinatown Overlay District in 2005. So what does that mean to the folks that live here and as well as this district?
Well, you know, look, our Asian American community is vital to the vibrancy of Southern Nevada. And I think this is really a meeting place for the community, but also a place where folks can come and have a great meal, try a new cuisine, and do fun things on the weekend.
It's a little bit different in some ways, as the owners here have been telling us. This is also the Asian Pacific American Cultural Center, so you will see some sorts of businesses that will never be here. And what does that mean as far as, just as far as that goes?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for people in the community to participate in cultural activities. You'll see, obviously, during the month of February, a lot of activities surrounding the Chinese New Year, but there are activities that go on all year long, and it's an opportunity for learning in our community.
We keep saying Chinatown, but obviously the Asian population in our community is burgeoning. In fact, one of three, our ballot is in Tagalog, which appeals to the Filipino community. And how big is our Asian community? How important is it?
Well, I'm fortunate. I have in District F, we have the largest Asian American community in Southern Nevada. And it is critical to our community here to have that kind of diversity. One of the difference between the Asian American community and the Hispanic community is that language is really, I would say, a barrier when first generation folks come here. And that's why we're trying to do a better job in terms of outreach to make sure that we have resources that are in multiple languages. Obviously, there are a variety of languages in the Asian American community, and making sure we have the resource. One of the things that I wanted to note is we haven't had very good diversity and representation at the elected and appointed level from the Asian American community. So one of the things that I had set out as a goal when I joined the commission was to make sure we had that representation. And so my planning commissioner is Vietnamese, and I have appointed members of the AAPI community to both the Spring Valley and the Enterprise Town Board.
What needs to be done, or what needs to continue to be done in this area to promote good growth?
Well, I think it's making sure that we provide those resources. I know one of the things that Commissioner Segalum and I are going to be working on in the very near future, there was a commission a while back that was sort of the outreach between the county commission and the AAPI community. And so that sort of went by the wayside, and so we're going to try and bring that commission back, make sure that we get that input from the community. And I know one thing that the Asian American community has really been asking for and looking for is a true cultural center where people can come, maybe if they have a language barrier, to learn how they interface with different government agencies. And so we're looking at opportunities to do that here along the Spring Mountain Corridor.
Commissioner, let's shift gears a little bit. I know that the homeless population is obviously always on the burner, and some legislative bills coming on. Sure. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I know you've recently suggested that, of course, the city of Las Vegas and Clark County really needs to roll up their sleeves and work together to combat this problem. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I know historically there's been some personality conflicts between the city and county at times, and I think we need to set that aside. If you're on the streets, you don't really care whether there's a personality conflict between an elected commissioner and an elected city council person. You're just trying to find somewhere to sleep. It was below freezing here yesterday, and I feel for the folks that are out there on the street and don't have a place to stay. And so we need to put those differences aside. We need to make sure that we're working collaboratively towards a solution.
Let's move into some of the legislative things. I know that the city is looking at some of those bills to address that. And what does the county need to do to follow those, or what are we doing to follow those, the bills?
Sure. So Clark County has a team that's up in Carson City right now. Mm-hmm. They are tracking the bills. We have a few bills of our own that are up at the legislative session that are critical to moving the county forward. But we have folks who are working on our behalf up the legislature to make sure that we're tracking those important issues.
Let's talk specifically about Assembly Bill 79, which will allow us quicker recourse to address abandoned buildings and delinquent property. What does that mean, Commissioner?
Well, I think that we have some areas of town that are a bit dilapidated, and there are some barriers right now to be able to address those issues. And so passing a bill like that will allow us to get in there and make those changes, so it's not a blight on the whole community.
One that I was surprised to see that you talked about was Senate Bill 127 that could possibly expand the county commission from 7 people to 9 people. Obviously, that isn't going to happen overnight, but what are your thoughts on that one?
I think that it would have to be a sort of a long-term study. I think that there would be some growing pains. There are only 7 county commission offices in the current building, and so we would have to figure out how that would happen, and we have to see what the real need is. Again, there's this interesting dynamic here in Clark County. In most places, it's an incorporated city that is the sort of the primary interface between people in the community. Here, you have districts like mine that are 95% only in unincorporated areas. And so you can't, if you're in my district, call up a city council person and ask for some constituent services or find out how you deal with stuff. You have to call my office. And so that puts a different burden on districts that are mine that are growing and in unincorporated areas than it does in some of the more the older neighborhoods that are in the incorporated areas.
You're obviously very well versed in what goes on in legislative sessions in Carson City, having spent a winter up there a few years ago. Yep. What can you bring from your days as a state senator to the county commission?
Well, I think it's in every elected body you have to be able to
contiguous, despite A&F not being really contiguous, you do have commission districts. Talk a little bit about what you expect to accomplish in that meeting.
Sure, both of us are very interested in getting to know our community more. We both share both the enterprise and town boards. We're about half and half on both of those areas of town. And so this is an opportunity to open the doors and make sure that people who have interests, who we've never met before, can get out there and talk to us face to face.
Is there anything so far, Commissioner, in your first couple months on the job that has really surprised you about Clark County that maybe you didn't know, or some issues that you must tackle at the county level?
I don't know if it surprised me, but I got to participate in an event last week where we honored the people that have worked at Clark County for 5, 10, 15 to 35 years. And I have to tell you, it's fantastic to work with the amazing folks over at Clark County who day in, day out serve the people in this community.
I know you also were at the Desert Diamond at the ceremony back in December, and that will continue to evolve and people will be playing ball there very soon, and going to be an amazing public art sculpture there as well in District F.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I happen to live in Mountain's Edge, so it's literally about half a mile from my house. And this is going to be a truly world-class facility. We've already got calls are coming in on a daily basis to want to use it for tournaments for softball and baseball.
And that is, of course, next to the Mountain's Edge Regional Park. What bring us up to date on what's going on out there?
Sure. So it looks like we'll hopefully have a certificate of occupancy here by the end of February. They anticipate that the first tournament will be played the first week in April. So I think we're exactly where we need to be in order to use the facility as soon as possible.
All right. We must take a quick break. We'll continue in your neighborhood here at the Las Vegas Chinatown Plaza with District F Commissioner Justin Jones. Stay tuned.
Thank you for calling the Jury Services Office.
You haven't really lived until you've had a hand in justice. Serve on a jury. Be sure to respond if you get a jury summons and play a role to ensure that justice is fairly served.
I think I'd be locked up right now if it weren't for the harbor.
Fighting drug or alcohol use and changes in behavior are all warning signs that a youth may need help.
I got in a fight and got expelled from school, and my mom took me to the harbor for help.
The harbor is a safe haven for troubled kids and their families. The goal is to give them resources so problems don't escalate. We know kids in crisis can become adults in crisis. Prevention and early intervention work.
They helped me get my life back on track. Sometimes you just need a fresh start.
The harbor offers hope and second chances.
District F is home to the Desert Breeze Regional Park Recreation and Aquatic Centers. With 119 acres, Desert Breeze is the second largest of all county parks and includes places to play nearly every type of team sport. The Aquatic Center offers indoor swimming and classes year-round, not here in the Chinatown area, but more in the the southwest areas, it just continues to flourish. What's going on out there?
Southwest part of town is burgeoning right now. There's a huge demand for residential and commercial properties out there. It's exciting to see the growth, but we also have to do it in the right way. And so we want to make sure that we have access to affordable or attainable housing at the same time that we have a continuation of business development efforts along the 215 corridor and in other parts of the Southwest.
Why is that area booming so much?
Well, I think part of it is just land. There are not that many areas of Clark County where you can still build. And there are still parcels out in the southwest part of town, but I think it's also the access. I mean, for my house in Mountain's Edge, I can get to the airport in 18 minutes. And it's pretty amazing to be in a city of 2.2 million people and be able to get to the airport from a suburb in that short period of time. So I think we're pretty blessed out in the Southwest to have truly great access to everything.
And of course, people keep talking a little bit about that Las Vegas Raiders Stadium, which is then at the threshold of the Strip and at 215 and 15. So this is really a vital time to make sure that roads and growth continues correctly into that area.
Absolutely. I think the Raiders Stadium is already bringing opportunities to our town, and I think it's only going to continue over the next few years. I think the other sort of corridor that is of great interest right now along the 215 is between Switch and its facility and the Harry Reid Research Center. I think that's really going to be a prime technology corridor for the future, and I'm really excited about the opportunities over there.
Talk a little bit about Switch, what they mean to our community, and what they mean to District F.
Sure. I mean, Switch is an international leader in providing data warehousing services. They were able to take advantage of some pretty amazing technology and have only managed to continue to expand their operations where they are, but also expand around the nation as really a model of how to do secure data warehousing.
Commissioner, obviously cannabis and cannabis consumption lounges are something that all jurisdictions are now wrestling with, and it seems now that Governor Sisolak, he's convened a green ribbon panel up at the legislative level right now. So what does that mean to us here locally? Are we going to kind of follow some recommendations, what they're going to, or just bring us up to date on that if you would?
Sure. So the county had a Green Ribbon Commission, and they sort of were framing things as it related to Clark County. But I think Governor Sisolak, former Commissioner Sisolak, sort of saw how things work down here. I want to make sure that we add sort of the big picture. And so the commission that he has appointed will look at these issues more broadly. And I think the most important thing is that this isn't a commission that's going to sit around for 3 years and then maybe make some recommendations. He's given them very firm deadlines so that the jurisdictions, both City of Las Vegas, Clark County, and jurisdictions around the state all have some guidance as to what the best practices are, and so that we can be on the same page. I think it only makes sense to coordinate with the cities on how we're going to address this issue.
And of course, the retail outlets there's many of those in District F. Are you satisfied with how this industry has come into our county?
Well, I think that unlike some other states like California, Nevada has really done it the right way. I think we had the benefit of watching how some states did it well, like Colorado, and how some states did it poorly, like California, and to take the best practices from other states and implement them here. We know how to do regulated industries better than anybody because of the Strip and gaming. And so we are able to apply those same principles to the cannabis industry, and I think that we're definitely doing it the right way, and we'll continue to do it that way.
And what do your constituents? Do you have a cross-section, or do constituents come to you with the same concerns or issues, pro or con?
Sure. I mean, there are certainly folks in the Southwest and across the county that have concerns about cannabis businesses that are close to schools or in their neighborhoods. But I think that there's a growing understanding that cannabis is not the reefer madness that decades ago I think was the perception. I have a close friend who suffers from lupus, and cannabis has been instrumental in her treatment of her disease, and I think that people are seeing that. It's folks in their community that cannabis is really helping.
Let's bring up something different, Commissioner. I know you're very interested in is the Shot Spotter. It's a new technology that helps triangulate the sound of gunfire or potential gunfire, just another tool in Metro's crime-fighting belt. But this isn't cheap. And as you said you're questioning the public deterrent. Do you think this should be expanded, and is it worth the millions of dollars to expand it? So what was your takeaway from Metro's presentation and what you know about ShotSpotter?
Sure. So ShotSpotter is this opportunity where they have sensing devices in neighborhoods and cameras that will allow them to sense when a gun is fired, and to allow the police to go to the exact location of where the gun is fired. A lot of times, as Metro explained at the hearing, you'll have people call in and say they heard a gunshot, but they can't figure out if it was on this block or that block. And so this technology really allows them to go to the right place. In terms of the cost, I think that we're going to have to look at that over the next budget cycle. But if it allows us to truly treat gun crimes, which are very substantial in our neighborhoods, then I think it makes sense. And one of the areas that they're proposing to expand is in my district, not far from here actually, along the 15. So I think that it's something we definitely need to look at, and really might be a tool that Metro can use to address budget discussion. And so I think we'll continue to have those discussions. We're in a budget cycle we're starting to go into next month.
Commissioner, I know you're a fierce warrior for environmental issues and water, and recently there was it's seemingly an agreement between the 7 basin states and the Colorado River, but then maybe there isn't. Can you bring us up to date on this murky water situation?
Sure. So as I think everybody knows, we're in a pretty severe drought. Despite the recent precipitation, we're well behind where we need to be as a basin along the Colorado River. There were some pretty serious concerns with Lake Mead dropping to what's called dead pool. And so if we drop below that level, then there's severe cuts that we made in what everyone along the basin can take in terms of water. Southern Nevada has done a masterful job of conservation of water. We clean every drop of water that goes through our system and put it back into Lake Mead. But if we had not entered into this agreement, then it wouldn't have mattered if we dropped down too low. And so 7 states and the country of Mexico signed on to a drought contingency plan that will hopefully stave off for the next several years any severe restrictions that might have gone into play.
Moving from the water to the mountains, I know as far as Red Rock goes, you've been on the point as far as updating the status as far as Red Rock and Gypsum Resources plan to build houses up on Blue Diamond Hill. Bring us up to date on that if you would.
Sure. So they had got their concept plan approved back in 2011. There were some things that happened in 2016 where they brought a new plan, and it got a little messy there with the county commission. But they proposed to move forward back in December of last year, pushed it off to January, and then in January, after discussions with some of the county commissioners, they said they would come back in 90 days. And so we'll see what they come back with in 90 days.
Commissioner, you're a new commissioner, and this is a new year, so we're trying something a little bit different here. I'm going to throw something different at you, some either-or questions. You pick one or the other, okay? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Sunset Park or Desert Breeze Park?
Desert Breeze, it's in my district.
UNLV basketball or UNLV football?
I'm going to go with basketball. My wife is a diehard fan from the Tarkanian days. So.
The Vegas Golden Knights or the Las Vegas Aviators?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I go to a lot of the Golden Knights games, but the Aviators are coming to my district, so I got to go with the Aviators.
Okay. Commissioner, I know you're a very active, athletic person. Running or biking?
I have to go with running. It's still my love. I can walk out my door any day of the year and go running.
Mount Charleston or Red Rock?
Got to go with Red Rock. It's my backyard. I can get up there in 10 minutes.
And I know you are a big fan of avocado toast, so Makers and Finders or Publicus?
They're both delicious, and I go to both of them all the time.
I'm very diplomatic. We must take another short break. We'll continue in your neighborhood with District F Commissioner Justin Jones. Stay tuned.
Do you know when to go on a yellow flashing arrow? They're popping up all over Clark County, and they're the new signal for turning left at intersections with a dedicated left turn lane. Here's what drivers need to know. A flashing yellow arrow means turns are permitted, but you must first yield to oncoming traffic and pedestrians. Then turn with caution. Keep in mind oncoming traffic has a green light. A solid green arrow means turn left. Oncoming traffic must stop. A solid yellow arrow means that the left turn signal is about to change to red, and you should be prepared to stop or prepared to complete your left turn if you're within the intersection. And finally, a solid red arrow means stop. These left turn yellow flashing arrow signals are new, so remember, a yellow flashing arrow means turn with caution. For more information, log on to ClarkCountyNV.gov and search keyword flashing yellow arrows.
District F is home to much of the master plan community of Summerlin, including the constantly evolving downtown Summerlin. This place is miles from our city. F, we're talking to your Commissioner, Justin Jones. So, Commissioner, we're wrapping up here in beautiful Chinatown here on Spring Mountain. How do you think this community is going to look, say, 5 years from now, 15 years from now?
I think we're an exciting time, and I joined the board at a time where we're really moving in the right direction, thanks to a lot of the work of the commissioners who have been around for much longer than I have. So I'm excited about the prospect of expanding our community. We've brought in a lot of sports teams, which I think is critical. I think we have opportunities in the technology sector and in the healthcare field to really continue the amazing diversification of our economy here. I joined the board of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, and I'm really looking forward to working with a group of 50 board members over there to do the right thing for our community.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I think most people know something about the Alliance. What's on their plate?
So they are really looking at strategic planning, planning for the future, and targeting a couple of sectors. Sports obviously was a big part of that. And I joined the board with Mark Bedane from the Raiders, so kind of a big deal to join with a man of his caliber. So I'm just excited for the opportunity to learn from business leaders, from government leaders, and make sure that Clark County is doing its part on the economic development side.
All right, well, appreciate you spending time with us. We'll let you get back to work.
Thank you.
Thank you. That wraps up this edition of In Your Neighborhood. Thanks to our good friends here at the Las Vegas Chinatown Plaza and to Commissioner Justin Jones for taking time to tell us about the area he calls home and represents as your elected official, District F. If you have any questions about this show or ideas for upcoming segments in your neighborhood, call me. I'm at 455-6357 or send an email to rsw@clarkcountynv.gov. Thanks for tuning in to Clark County Television. On behalf of our production staff, I'm Randy Swallow. We'll see you again next time in your neighborhood.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
I'm Clark County Fire Chief Greg Castle. 7 people die every day in a home fire. To help save lives, the Red Cross and local groups are installing free smoke alarms and developing family escape plans in high-risk neighborhoods. Please volunteer at the Sound the Alarm event to help us install hundreds of smoke alarms this spring. Find out more at soundthealarm.org/Nevada, and for a free smoke alarm installation and evacuation plan, please call 702-697-1707.
Hello, I'm Michael Naft. Outreach and constituent services are among my top priorities as your representative for District A on the Clark County Commission. Several state legislators are joining me in hosting a series of informal meetings with residents to hear your concerns, provide information, and discuss possible solutions. For more information, please visit ClarkCountyNV.gov or call me at 702-455-3500.
After October 1st, people started saying, Vegas strong. But the truth is, I don't always feel strong.
Some days I feel scared.
Alone.
Exhausted.
Overwhelmed.
Hopeless.
Anxious.
But I didn't think I needed help.
Because I thought things would get better.
We didn't have physical wounds.
But what happened that night affected all of us.
And it's never too late to get the help you need.
Reach out to the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center to see how they can help you.
You're watching Clark County Television, our community, our home, Clark County, Nevada.
Straight ahead on UMC Digest, we'll head into the classroom for a stuffed animal clinic, learning what happens when Jeffrey swallows a penny. Also, how this robot can perform surgical procedures more accurately than even human hands. And how you can help save a life by knowing exactly what to do in an emergency. The UMC Digest starts right now. After the October 1st shootings, many people asked what they could do to help. The number one thing you can do is be educated onto how to literally stop the bleed should another mass casualty unfortunately occur, or even if you come upon someone who is bleeding to death in a car crash or other accidental trauma. UMC offers complimentary Stop the Bleed classes, education that is just as important as knowing how to do CPR. Take a look at a recent Stop the Bleed course taught by UMC for Red Rock Search and Rescue. If you come upon an accident scene or witness a life-threatening injury, would you know what to do to save someone's life?
Stopping the bleeding immediately as it happens. So you're at the scene, you are a bystander, and now you are a rescuer. So you are going to literally stop watching someone bleeding and intervene in stopping the bleeding by applying direct pressure or possibly a tourniquet if you have that, of one of the bleeding control kits that we are advocating.
Knowing what to do before someone is literally bleeding to death in front of you could save their life.
Calling 911 at that time as the blood's pouring out, it's not going to save their life. It's just not. There's not enough resources, not enough time. These guys are great and could be there in a few minutes, but it's not going to happen.
A tourniquet placed appropriately will stop the bleed while emergency help arrives.
And the whole concept of tourniquets and bleeding control is to apply the tourniquet above, more what we call proximal or closer to the heart from the bleeding source. So if the gunshot wound's in your thigh, you obviously want to apply it higher than that to prevent the blood that's coming out. That's hurting. What are you doing?
It's supposed to hurt.
Oh, okay.
That means I'm cutting off the...
Oh, okay.
That means you're not going to die.
killing me.
I'm super glad about that.
Okay.
That means you're not going to die.
All right.
I haven't encountered a time when I would need to use this yet, but you know what? You never know. You never know when you might.
Right.
And the thing is, we train for all kinds of scenarios and eventualities, and so that we'll be prepared to help anyone that we might come across.
How do you know you put the tourniquets on correctly? The bleeding stops.
During the Stop the Bleed course, participants also learn how to pack a wound.
So what will happen is for you to be able to have some basic concepts and basic knowledge that we'll take you through tonight and be able to just literally stop the bleeding. The number one cause of mortality and deaths in trauma that would be preventable is just hemorrhage, exsanguination. A lot of other things you can't control, and that's unfortunate, but bleeding is one that you can literally stop just by applying direct pressure or a tourniquet.
Those couple of techniques done in just a few seconds could help save a life.
I want every single soccer mom, everyday Joe, every high school kid, every person that works at a golf course, every person that works at a casino, any person at all is able to do this training. We can teach this to young kids. This is something that if you see bleeding happening, you can actually intervene and stop the bleed and save a life.
Here at the UMC Trauma Center, we have a 97% survivability rate, including patients who come to us with less than a 1% chance to live. We are very proud of those statistics and also aware that even with the best of medicine, sometimes patients are given a life-limiting diagnosis or, despite best efforts, are on a journey to the end of their life. UMC's Integrative Therapy and Tranquility program helps to make those moments more comfortable for patients and their families.
A little bit. Were you feeling that
in my stomach.
Your stomach. At UMC, healthcare is about more than medicine and procedures.
So let's not talk about the treatment part anymore. I just want to find out how you are.
UMC's palliative care and integrative services takes our treatment pathway to a new level.
We're not just going in, just pushing some meds and leaving the room. We're with the family, we're bonding. You find out the whole, for me it's holistic nursing because I'm a holistic nurse as part of the Tranquility program too. So I like to think of the whole family. So when you go in and you're working with the family and finding out what was that person like, what were their goals, what did they want, what was important to them, who's their family members, who's at the bedside with them.
It guides the family basically with the end of life choices. I mean, a lot of family doesn't know where to go. Most patients come in, doesn't have advanced care planning, doesn't have a living will, and they just listen to maybe one physician or a couple of the residents. Having Dr. Estrada and their team come over here, pretty much explain what's palliative care, what's hospice. It's really needed. I mean, I'm glad that we have it here at UMC.
Patients with life-threatening injuries or life-limiting illnesses such as cancer, dementia, cardiology, or stroke issues that come along with burdensome symptoms can all benefit from palliative care.
The frontline teams are really great at having those discussions. They talk with families. As most of us know, when there is difficult news that is coming up, sometimes you hear a little bit of the news or parts of the news, or you just need some sort of gentle reinforcement. So we are the second line team that comes in to support the frontline team's assessment. We affirm prognosis, and then we let them know from a risk to benefit standpoint what is happening with treatment, what are the best treatments, what treatments may be more harmful than helpful, and what treatments could be contributing to a good quality of life. So we help them weigh the risk to benefit, and we help them make some very difficult decisions together.
Lab tests and clinical observations can help physicians and families with those decisions. Then palliative care is used to care for patients and families.
We're able to help families and patients understand the situation, and we look at how to make these moments the best moments possible for the patient. And if it's pulling back on some of the aggressive treatments to just honor whatever process is happening, whatever journey is happening, it makes for a better journey for them. We don't have to palliate symptoms caused by very aggressive, harsh measures if they're not appropriate. In a true end-of-life situation, they're walking that walk, and my team and I are walking that walk with them.
That walk with Dr. Estrada turns from clinical to very caring.
I can speak for myself and my team when I say that every time we approach a patient and a family, we approach them as if they're our own family.
In a hospital where we are so proud of saving lives, it's equally honorable to create an appropriate end-of-life experience for our patients and their families.
We figure out what they would want, the music, if they would want to be clean and fresh, or what blankets they'd want around in their pictures. And then we do everything we can to make sure they're very comfortable, to make sure that families around and very close, no matter what we're doing, even if we're removing a patient off ventilatory support, we bring everyone close in there, and we make sure they're holding their hand and they're with them, and then we take a step back.
Those are important and sensitive moments for our families.
I've always been very proud of my job and the job our team does. It's quite incredible, although death and dying can be devastating, as I mentioned. It's happening. It's something we can't control. One is being called to a higher power, to a higher place, and there's nothing any of us can really do about stopping that process. I mean, we try to sometimes, but there is also a way of honoring that process, so it's a change in thinking. It's a change in culture.
That change in thinking, when everything possible has been done from a curative standpoint, honors the process of life and death.
When you think about it, one is going on a certain journey, may it be a very difficult, burdensome journey with a serious illness, or an end-of-life journey, the journey's happening. They can walk this walk with us or walk it without us, and luckily at UMC they have the option to walk it with us. And if we do our jobs well, and we work so hard to do that, under our watch they will not suffer. So because we can alleviate suffering and enhance one's quality of life no matter what the situation is, it makes it the best job in the world.
When we come back, we'll take you to UMC's newest primary care location, where you can have your own personal physician. That's coming up on the other side of this break.
There's no time for downtime. Better get better, quick. UMC Quick Care has 8 locations, and you never need an appointment. So get in and get better. UMC Quick Care.
Find a dock in my neighborhood.
The nearest dock is the Port of Long Beach, 284 miles away.
Find a dock. Dock!
Calling Doug.
Finding a family doctor in your neighborhood is as easy as visiting a UMC Primary Care. Locations valley-wide, there's one near you.
Find nearest Thai food.
Typhoons occur in the North Pacific Ocean.
There's no time for downtime. Better get better, quick. UMC Quick Care has 8 locations, and you never need an appointment. So get in and get better. UMC Quick Care.
Welcome back to UMC Digest. We're glad you're with us. UMC offers the full range of health care for your family, from our quick care locations where you can get in, get out, and get better quick, to our main hospital and primary care, your own personalized physician to take care of you even when you're feeling well.
Hi, Kim. Hi, good afternoon.
Dr. Tan has been Kim's primary care physician for 5 years.
So is it here? Right here.
Primary care physicians serve as the overall director for your health.
The primary care is the one who would treat the patient as a person rather than a disease.
And preventative maintenance, just like you do with your car, is key to your overall function and health.
Let's give an example about the 50 years old and above. So everybody, as in everybody, when they reach 50 years of age, needs colonoscopy. All female, when they reach the age of 40, they should have a screening mammogram.
Blood pressure screenings and cholesterol checks can help catch the signs of cardiovascular disease before it's too late.
They are making a gamble in their health. That's certainly. If you are not seeing your primary care, then you are missing the benefits of a health screening.
Sharing your medical history, having up-to-date screenings, and yearly visits with your primary care physician helps build a meaningful partnership in your overall well-being.
Patients can feel when they can trust their provider. Their demeanor, the way they interact with you. When you say things to your provider and then they pull through with their promises that I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to help you get to your goal in terms of your health. When everything gets fulfilled, I think that's how you build that bond.
A bond that has helped keep Kim healthy for years.
Dr. Tan always sits with you, always, make sure that before you leave the door that we both understand that this is our goal, we're both going to reach it. And you agreed, you put your opinion, I put my opinion, and then it's a collaboration between the patient and the doctor.
UMC's new electronic medical record called UMC Connect helps you further stay connected with your health. You can easily view lab results and upcoming appointments. Children's Hospital of Nevada at UMC is the only children's hospital of its kind in Nevada. We're home to Nevada's only designated pediatric trauma center, offering the highest level of care available anywhere in Nevada. Last year, we saw a devastating rise in child abuse deaths, children coming to us with fatal injuries at the hands of a caregiver. So now we're reaching out and speaking out, educating our community on how to prevent child abuse. Dr. Jay Fisher is the medical director for Children's Hospital of Nevada at UMC's Pediatric Emergency Department. He cares for the sickest of sick, those with life-threatening illnesses. But the most heartbreaking patients for him are the ones who suffered their injuries at the hands of someone else.
These young children are defenseless and at the most vulnerable part of their lives. They deserve the right to grow up.
Shockingly, child abuse rates have doubled from 2016 to 2017.
Any number above zero, of course, is too many, but we cannot stand by idly as a community or at the Children's Hospital of Nevada and see this number continue to rise. So we're calling upon all of you to help us to address this difficult problem.
Oftentimes, it's a little-known caregiver creating a pattern of abuse.
You should know that child abuse fatalities typically aren't an isolated incident. It isn't usually just one event. There's typically numerous events that have antedated these fatalities.
Signs of abuse include malnutrition, poor hygiene, unexplained or odd bruises or burns, delayed development, or when a child appears frightened of a parent or caregiver. Be very careful who you ask or hire to watch your children.
I would say specifically, obviously, that anyone with a substance abuse issue should not be caring for children or babies. That substance abuse can be alcohol or any of the other substances that you see abused in your community today.
And all parents can always use a reminder about the importance of a timeout for themselves.
We also ask caregivers to take a moment when they individually feel overwhelmed in their role as a child caregiver. We all here at UMC are mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles of young children. And we know that raising children is a 24/7, 365 enterprise. And that these stresses can make each and every one of us, no matter how strong, have points of weakness. We ask you to pause during those times and step away so that you don't become embroiled in a situation that could lead to a child death.
When we come back, we'll head inside the OR for an up-close look at the Da Vinci robot. That's coming up on UMC Digest next.
You never know when you can't really see coming. And sometimes you just can't avoid the old. Life is full of surprises. So when life pulls up, get to UMC Quick Care. For life's bumps and breaks, sneezes and wheezes, one of our Valley locations is ready and waiting to save the day. So you can get in, get out, get better, quick. UMC Quick Care.
Mom, we're out of cereal. Can I go to Jennifer's tonight? No, you said you were going to take me to dance.
There's no time for downtime. Better get better, quick. UMC Quick Care has 8 locations, and you never need an appointment. So get in and get better. UMC Quick Care.
Welcome back to UMC Digest. UMC is home to the most advanced surgical technology with robotic surgery that allows for faster recoveries and better outcomes. Now UMC is one of the only places in the West to offer robotic surgery for children. This is the Da Vinci robot, capable of performing surgical procedures at the hands of a skilled surgeon actually sitting steps away from the patient.
One of the nice things is when you put your head into the console is actually when the robot gets activated. So if I'm out here talking, the robot's not going to do anything, even if my hands are here.
And when a surgeon is at the helm, surgical procedures can be done with shorter hospitalizations, less pain, and less pain medication for adults and pediatric patients alike.
The Da Vinci system translates the surgeon's hands at the console to very precise and fine movements on the patient. And by doing so, that decreases the tremor, decreases any abnormal manipulation, kind of increases the efficiency of a surgery.
Which all leads to decreased complications.
So we're less bleeding, less inadvertent injuries to other structures, the ability to do more complex surgeries with the robot in more precise fashion.
Removing pancreatic and lung masses and kidney transplants can all be done robotically.
Compared to open surgery, there's no comparison. Open surgery, you have big scars.
And UMC is one of the only hospitals offering this caliber of surgical care for younger patients. Two local Las Vegas families have gone above and beyond, donating so generously to Children's Hospital of Nevada at UMC. Jerry and Jenny Shear know too well what it's like to have premature babies in the neonatal intensive care unit, and it was important for them to give back. Over the past 2 years, Jerry and Jenny Shear have donated more than $500,000 to Children's Hospital of Nevada at UMC. Part of that donation was used to buy state-of-the-art incubators called giraffes for our tiniest patients. The critical care beds support healthy neonatal growth while protecting neurodevelopment.
This is really used for resuscitation, so it's all integrated in one. You don't have to have any extra equipment.
That very kind donation helped us to purchase 3 of the giraffe care stations.
You see now that they have state-of-the-art equipment to help care for children in the NICU, in the emergency room. It really does our heart good to know that other parents are going to have the best opportunity to see that positive outcome for their own children.
In addition to that equipment, another donation from the Shear Family Foundation helped buy infant car seats for our babies going home for the first time and treated our patients, families, and staff to a big holiday celebration.
My wife Jenny and I could not be happier to see this equipment here at Children's Hospital at UMC being put to good use. The team here is so amazing. The doctors, the nurses, the entire staff, the outcomes that they have with the children is just excellent.
Since then, the Shears have donated several $100,000 more to providing more innovative equipment and recently donated the funds to create an important video message about child abuse prevention.
I'm glad it's here, but thank you so much because we've been wanting new stuff for our hospital for so long. We provide excellent care here, but we were somehow not having the funding to be able to get the latest and do the best for our children in Nevada. And with you guys coming on board and becoming our partners, it has really helped us a lot.
Today is a very happy day for us, but it's a happier day for the hospital and the Las Vegas Valley, and that's what's important to us.
The Shear family donation is entirely appreciated by UMC staff and our patients and their families who benefit from your generosity. Thank you. Children's Hospital of Nevada at UMC hosts a stuffed animal clinic at local schools to help give children an inside and very fun look into the world of healthcare. Take a look at how Jeffrey the giraffe became our patient and how these students might become the next generation of doctors and nurses.
Can you hear that? Yeah? Now let's listen to your giraffe's heart. Do you hear that? Does he sound okay? All right, you're my expert.
A first look inside healthcare for these students is a bit less intimidating thanks to Children's Hospital of Nevada's team who takes the stuffed animal clinic on the road.
So we get the penny, we put it in a bag, and we send it to the lab. All right? So now he's fine. He's good to go.
In this particular case, Jeffrey has swallowed a penny, which sends him to the hospital. Then all is well. Well, until he snaps his giraffe limb.
So I took the picture. Now we come over here and that sends it to my computer so we get to look it up. And let's see if it's really broken. What do you think? Where's the break? Yep, that's it. That's a broken leg, all right.
No worries though, Jeffrey gets a quick cast and he's on his way.
Probably feels better now, huh? There's that, and then you're gonna go over to the pharmacy.
Toys R Us generously donated the giraffes for our clinic, and this little guy sure seems to get into a lot of mischief.
He was really hungry, and his mother accidentally put a penny in his dinner plate, and he accidentally swallowed it, and now he needed to go to the hospital.
We're hoping to introduce the kids in their own little atmosphere to the healthcare. So they'll be going through different departments, for instance, triage, respiratory, radiology, to kind of get them the feel of what a hospital visit would be like. And at the same time, these kids are our future. So hopefully we could get them into our healthcare and get them into being future nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of UMC Digest. For more information on all of the stories you've watched, please head to our websites. We have two of them, umcsn.com and childrenshospitalofnevada.org. You can also find us on social media. We'll see you next time right here on Clark County Television. Until then, take care.
Welcome to Club Ride. Club Ride is a free employee benefits program that encourages and rewards the employees that would like to or currently carpooling, walking, biking, taking transit, or even motorcycling to and from work.
Club Ride has excellent programs and services for commuters,
Such as Guaranteed Ride Home, Club Ride Discounts, Easy Rider, and the monthly price drawings.
Club Ride Rewards is a program that rewards commuters every month for clean green commutes to and from work. As a Club Ride member, you can win cash and prizes every month. It's a great thing.
Oh, we love winning the awards. We've been carpooling over 11 years now.
We were doing it before it was the thing to do.
I think I'm the better driver.
No, I'm the better driver.
Carpooling was just kind of a natural thing. We could ride to work, we could talk to one another on our way, and saved us time and gas. But that extra prize makes it extra fun.
I was carpooling before it was cool, and before we got the Rockstar parking for carpooling. Club Ride has this really cool website. You go in and you log your trips each week, and it calculates for you how much money you've saved, how much of an impact you've had on the environment in terms of less emissions and so on. So I know for a fact I've saved $300 each year carpooling.
After 20 years of driving in Las Vegas traffic, I think I'd had enough and I was ready for a change. I currently commute by taking the new transit buses. There's a new park and ride in my neighborhood, so I just drive over there and hop on the bus.
I commute with this bad boy right here. My employer not only supports it, she lets me park my bicycle right in my closet at work. I love the Club Ride discount program because I get to use it at Jason's Deli, Cold Stone Creamery, and then I'm even able to use it at my bike shop, Bicycle World. I wish I would have learned about it earlier.
One of the great benefits for employers is the outreach that we do. We set up a table, we give away free t-shirts, we talk to them, we educate them about the program, and then of course the incentives that are available to them. Once employers realize what we do for them, they love it.
Club Ride is extremely successful at Bellagio. We've been a partner with Club Ride since 1999, and currently we have about 1,200 employees enrolled. We provide our employees with reserved parking, bike racks, motorcycle area, as well as pre-tax payroll deduction for the passes.
I think the Club Ride program is very well thought out, very well engineered. Cox is really committed to being a Club Ride partner. We have swipe machines at every entrance where employees can log their commutes. We also have bicycle racks. We have the ability for employees to work compressed work weeks and flexible schedules. And we have pool vehicles that are available for those employees that commute who need a vehicle to use to visit a customer or to go to another office.
Having a strong commute options program is really important to the city of Henderson. Currently, we have over 400 of our employees that are enrolled in the Club Ride program. We have lots of prize winners every month, and I really make a big deal about it. I hand deliver all the prizes. They're just really excited, especially if one of the other employees sees that they're getting this prize. That kind of motivates them and they want to be part of that.
I'm Joan with Cox Communications. I'm proud to be a carpooler, and I think you should be too.
Less traffic and cleaner air, and that's a good thing.
Less traffic, cleaner air. Carpooling is a good thing.
I'm Joey over at the Rio, and I love being a Club Ride member.
I'm Bill with Cox Communications, and we're a proud partner with Club Ride.
Commute options are a good thing. Partner with Club Ride today.
To find out more, visit the Club Ride website.
Or call 228-RIDE or go to your HR office and speak to your transportation coordinator.
That's a wrap. That sounds good. That's a wrap.
Or can I do like Janis Joplin? That's all, folks.
Find a dock in my neighborhood.
The nearest dock is the Port of Long Beach, 284 miles away.
Find a dock. Doc!
Calling Doug.
Finding a family doctor in your neighborhood is as easy as visiting a UMC primary care. Locations valley-wide, there's one near you.
Find nearest Thai food.
Typhoons occur in the North Pacific Ocean.
The sale of marijuana is getting underway in Las Vegas.
But where can you consume it? On the Strip?
No, not even in your hotel room.
At my friend's house?
Sure, if they say yes.
How about in my camper?
Don't consume it and drive. That's dangerous and illegal.
Well, out hiking Mount Charleston?
No, not in any public spaces. You can't consume it or even possess it at the airport either.
At the bar or a nightclub?
No, not there either. Visit ClarkCountyNV.gov for more information. Be informed, be responsible.
Our community, our home. Clark County, Nevada. Thanks for watching Clark County Television.
Coming up next on Clark County Chronicles, a long-time after-school program has a new place for young boxers to train, thanks to Commission Chair Marilyn Kirkpatrick and some community partners. Commissioner Jim Gibson hosted another job fair in District G. We'll tell you more. And it was Java with Jones at a neighborhood coffee shop in District F. Those stories and more coming up next on Clark County Chronicles. Hello, I'm Randy Swallow. Welcome to Clark County Chronicles. The month of April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. I recently sat down with one of Clark County's Assistant Directors in Family Services, Judy Tudor, to learn more about how the department is making Clark County a better place for children and families. Judy, thank you so much for joining us. The month of April, as we say, is Child Abuse Prevention Month. What does this month mean to you or anyone in the child welfare business?
Sadly, it's a busy month for us, and we get a lot of calls about child abuse and neglect, obviously all year long. Our hotline probably fields thousands and thousands of calls every month, and we screen those calls to determine what is suspicious of abuse and neglect, and ultimately go out and investigate a good percentage of those. But it's a very busy month for us in child welfare.
I know something that is very prominent on your website are the protective factors that relate to child abuse prevention. Talk to me about some of those.
Yeah, during Child Abuse Prevention Month, and really all the time, we like to talk about various things that we can do to help prevent child abuse and neglect. The reality is that most child abuse and neglect happens within the family system. And so we talk about these 6 protective factors as things that we can do to try and prevent child abuse and neglect. So the first factor really has to do with nurturing and attachment. The first few years of a child's life are critically important to them. It's critical brain development that's happening, and a consistent caregiver is really important for children and for parents to have that attachment to their children. And it really kind of sets the stage for how they interact with that child and how that child responds to them throughout their life. So when a child is crying or needs something, a parent's ability to meet those needs and respond is critically important. The second protective factor is really about parent knowledge and having an understanding of child development. Kids don't come with manuals, and parenting is really hard. For anyone who is a parent, you know it's a challenge. And so any opportunities that parents have to learn more about how to parent their child at different developmental stages is critically important. At Clark County, we offer free parenting classes through our Parenting Project program that anyone in the community can call us at 702-455-5295, and they can access parenting classes. There's a link on our website as well that people can look into that. So that's a great resource because kids don't come with manuals. If you want to learn more about basic parenting skills or more complicated issues, parenting teens, which can be a challenge in and of itself, you can get more information there. The other protective factor is around parent resiliency. And what this is really talking about is a parent's ability to kind of bounce back from situations. Kids will sometimes test us and push our buttons. And our ability to understand they are children and we are the adults, and we have to kind of put our own needs aside to meet our children's needs, is critically important in being able to prevent child abuse and neglect from happening. And then the fourth protective factor is about support and connections. So having those other parents that you can talk to, family, causes them to lash out. No parent ever wakes up in the morning and goes, you know, today's the day I'm going to abuse my child, right? It's something that people get frustrated about. They get stressed and overwhelmed. And so some of those support services just to help them with rent or transportation or to take some of the stress off of them are really important. And then the last protective factor is really about understanding your children and children being able to express their feelings and parents really encouraging them to express their feelings. Talk about how they're feeling, empathize with what they're going through, and being able to provide some guidance that hopefully they've gotten from some of that parenting knowledge that they've gained.
Obviously, outside of the family situation, well, let's bring this back a little bit, like Homeland Security, see something, say something. That pretty much pertains to people in the child welfare, that if I'm out in the public and see something that doesn't say right, I could hit one of those hotlines or do something, and I shouldn't hold my tongue, right?
Absolutely. If at any point in time you are concerned about something you see happening to a child, you should absolutely contact our Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline. Our Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can contact them at 702-399-0081. Someone will answer the phone. They will take down your information. And even if you're not sure, if you see something that looks unusual, suspicious, call it in. It's our job to figure out if that's abuse or neglect and something that needs to be investigated. Sometimes people will call us and it's not, and that's okay. It's better to be safe than sorry, and give us a call and let us try and figure that out and help walk someone through that.
You talked about the Parenting Project classes. These are for all, there's several different classes for all different age groups, and some of these classes aren't just for a child that is in trouble, right? This is to teach you maybe to be a better parent or how you can better interact with your child. Is that right?
Absolutely. These are for any parents in the community. I know when I was a new parent, I read every book I could get my hands on, right, to try and understand what to do, how to parent. And these are classes that help anyone in the community with those kinds of things. You're curious about, you know, we get a lot of parents that struggle in parenting their teens. There's a class that we offer where the parent attends and the parent and teen attend together on some of those sessions, just to learn how to communicate better, to work with one another through that difficult teenage stage where, you know, teenagers are trying to assert their own independence, and parents are still trying to help them stay safe and help them work some of those issues out. So there are classes for how to care for an infant if you're a new parent. There are classes for how to care for toddlers, for school age. So yeah, they offer a lot of different resources for any parent who just needs some extra help and support in trying to work their way through being a parent. We definitely use evidence-based curriculum in our parenting classes because we want to give